Breaking news, and Conservative MP Lee Anderson has been suspended following comments he made about the Mayor of London. A spokesperson for Chief Whip Simon Hart said the following his refusal to apologise for comments made yesterday, the Chief Whip has suspended the Conservative Whip from Lee Anderson.
Are you ready to apologise?
No.
Why not?
Because apologise for what?
Because you implied that the Mayor of London is under the control of Islamists, and he isn't, is he?
Well, who's controlling the streets at the moment in London? We see every Wednesday night, it's almost a weekly occurrence now, Parliament Square is taken over by a mob of extremists who are shining disgusting projections onto Big Ben from the river to the sea. We've seen it time and time again now. You're taking away your opinion of what I've said. So this is my opinion of what I said. The message I tried to get across is that the streets in London on certain days of the week are not in control of Mayor Khan. They're in control of the mob, the raging mob.
What's the reaction, do you think, from Conservative Party grassroots to the Lee Anderson story?
I think there's an element of concern about it, but I think in terms of the key issue, I think there's real concern amongst the Conservative grassroots and actually millions of people across the country when it comes to the threat posed by radical Islam.
It's well known that Islamist extremism and Islamist terrorism is the biggest faith-based challenge that we have. But again, I point out in the report that by far the biggest victims of Islamist extremism are Muslims. And the vast majority of Muslims in the UK are kind, generous, warm, friendly, decent people. But they're being let down by a very tiny minority who are causing these problems.
This is a survey of British Muslims, remember. Only 25% believe that Hamas committed murder and rape. Well, we've all seen the pictures of what happened, the heli gliders that came in to that festival, but only 25% of British Muslims are prepared to accept that it actually happened. Nearly half, 46%, sympathise with Hamas. Hang on, Hamas is a terrorist organisation, a prescribed organisation by the British government, seen to be not just an enemy to Israel, but potentially an enemy to us. And yet nearly half of British Muslims support it, or at least sympathise with it. 52% of British Muslims want it to be illegal to show an image of Muhammad the Prophet. Well, you know, in our country, we do cartoons of the Archbishop of Canterbury, we do cartoons of the Pope, and anybody in religion. It's certainly up to their image being portrayed, and often in a less than favourable light. And the one that really, I thought was perhaps most worrying of all, that 32% of British Muslims want to see Sharia law implemented in the UK. I find this genuinely terrifying, and I say that because the Muslim population of Britain is 4 million today. By 2050, it's projected to be over 10 million. Are we to have a huge group of millions of people living in our midst that not only don't share our values, but in many ways would like to impose their values on us?
It's 1 in 3 who expressed either, moderate or strong support for Sharia law. I think what you're seeing is a failure of integration policy. I'm not sure it's necessarily, tied per se to waves of migration, because actually what's interesting is that UK-born Muslims throughout the study appear to be slightly more radical than foreign-born Muslims, which tells you that there's a bigger problem going on within the UK right now about how we're integrating and how we're bringing people to share values with each other.
If you took over Britain, you'd ban alcohol.
Of course, alcohol will be banned, drugs will be banned, pornography will be banned, gambling will be banned. But the money says that we know monarchy.
La ilaha illallah! La ilaha illallah! Everyone here lives in Britain. Everyone's relatively happy, or they wouldn't be here, hopefully. Why would you want to live under a caliphate? Or why would you want to live under ISIS version of a caliphate?
When I look to Britain, and I can speak as well as an ex-non-Muslim, issues like smoking, free mixing, music, and a society which is largely based on nudity, pornography, it's not something which any practicing Muslim would enjoy living under. So whether ISIS or any other state implements the caliphate, I think any practicing Muslim who hears that the caliphate has been implemented and the laws of the Quran and Sunnah are being established, they would flock to that place.
But if they want to live under the law of their own God?
So what happens to people who don't want to live under Islam in your version
What
of the
happens to those
caliphate?
people who don't want to obey the law of Britain? They get arrested.
And you think it is happening, you're just not sure if ISIS are okay, are just?
I'm not sure if ISIS are the ones, only because the news that we are getting is subjected to a lot of filters, as you know. So for that reason, I'm not sure. But if it is, I will have no qualms about giving my sort of pledge.
Dr. Mukadam, what is the penalty for apostasy?
Before
we keep coming down this apostasy. Give us a quick answer on what is the penalty for apostasy.
You very well know, if it's an Islamic country, then the Sharia is very clear. Apostasy is dealt with the death penalty.
Thank you, that's all I want to hear.
There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of the lack of decision making, trying to be politically correct, or assuming that they know the Middle East and they know Islam and they know the others far better than we do.
Breaking news we're getting from the PA Newswire that there's been reports of an explosion outside Liverpool Street Station. That, of course, in the East End of London.
It's reasonably clear that there have been a series of terrorist attacks in London. There are obviously casualties, both people that have died and people seriously injured. And our thoughts and prayers, of course, are with the victims and their families.
The former Treasury Minister Stephen Timms is being treated for stab wounds in an East London hospital. He was attacked during an advice surgery in his East Ham constituency. Police have arrested a 21-year-old woman in connection with the incident.
The soldier killed in yesterday's horrific attack right here in Woolwich has been named as 25-year-old drummer Lee Rigby, a member of 2nd Battalion of the Fusiliers. The flowers lie here at the gates of the base of the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers. Drummer Rigby had served in Helmand province in Afghanistan and has a 2-year-old son. The two suspects, one named locally as Michael Adebaloja, remains under arrest in hospital.
Britain is waking up to an uncomfortable reality. Events that seem far away have roots much closer to home. The killer believed to be responsible for the death of British aid worker David Haines is this man, the apparently British IS fighter gaining notoriety for a series of gruesome hostage beheadings in the Middle East. It's now estimated that 500 British Muslims are fighting abroad, with groups including IS.
How many people from this country are fighting for ISIS, and what risk do they pose to the UK?
Well, the estimates that have been given so far is that around 400 people from the UK have taken part in fighting with ISIS, but those numbers are much more based around what is happening in Syria rather than what is happening in Iraq, where we have considerably less information.
We have tonight an exclusive report on how British women have started signing up for jihad in Syria. And this is the first evidence that women have been going to Syria to fight for rebel forces and indeed to support the men, many of whom they've never met before, and even marry them and have their children.
Now, we were telling you a little bit earlier about that breaking news out of Greater Manchester of the police there and emergency services attending what they described about 20 minutes ago as an incident that they were having to deal with. Well, now Greater Manchester Police have tweeted that it is a serious incident at Manchester Arena. That's the tweet there.
At 10:33 last night, the police were called to reports of an explosion at Manchester Arena in Manchester city centre near Victoria train station. We now know that a single terrorist detonated his improvised explosive device near one of the exits of the venue, deliberately choosing the time and place to cause maximum carnage and to kill and injure indiscriminately. The explosion coincided with the conclusion of a pop concert, which was attended by many young families and groups of children.
The tourists who'd come to see the Mother of Parliaments ended up running away from it. their panic explained by the sound of gunshots. For hours, Parliament was placed in lockdown, emergency vehicles blocking all roads. An air ambulance arrived to collect casualties. The security services had told us there'd been many close calls before, but this was the day the terror threat arrived at Westminster and even entered its grounds.
As you know, we've declared this as a terrorist incident, and the Counter-Terrorism Command are carrying out a full-scale investigation into the events today.
Good evening. 2 people have died in what the Metropolitan Police are describing as a terrorist incident on London Bridge. The attacker was later shot dead. Several members of the public managed to wrestle him to the ground, and their bravery has been widely praised.
This began as an issue between parents and a school. But today, albeit a calm and peaceful protest, the situation was hijacked by Muslims from across West Yorkshire. There is unity here in their anger of a satirical cartoon depicting the Prophet Muhammad as a terrorist being shown to students at Batley Grammar School, an image which is deeply offensive.
The use of these materials was done in a deliberate, threatening and provocative manner, leaving the children concerned for their safety and well-being.
Why can't this man go back to his job and resume his normal life?
Because he's had death threats made against him for showing a cartoon, Kevin. That's the problem. And the problem, of course, is that regardless of what the school has found in this case, which is, of course, that he's done nothing wrong, there are people in his local community who believe that he did do a lot wrong and were willing to make death threats to him. So as a result, I'm not surprised he doesn't want to go back. He might be, knocked off at any given moment.
Essex Police confirming that the Conservative MP, Sir David Amess, has died following that stabbing that happened just a few hours ago. A 25-year-old man has been arrested. Police say they're not looking for anyone else in connection with the attack.
Well, I think all our hearts are full of shock and sadness today to the loss of Sir David Amess MP, who was killed in his constituency surgery in a church after almost 40 years of continuous service to the people of Essex and the whole of the United Kingdom.
In this country, in the United Kingdom, uniquely badly across all of the Western countries, we cannot seem to muster up even the courage to talk about this. And so what happens is you have brutal attacks like the murder of Sir David Amess, and there is effectively silence. When you have a massive terrorist attack like the 2017 suicide bombing at Manchester Arena, where dozens of young people are murdered and have their lives unchangeably altered, we get what? Don't look back in anger.
This is very urgent business, ladies and gentlemen, I beseech you. Resist it while you still can, and before the right to complain is taken away from you, which will be the next thing. You will be told you can't complain because you're Islamophobic. The term is already being introduced into the culture as if it was an accusation of race hatred, for example, or bigotry, whereas it's only the objection to the preachings of a very extreme and absolutist religion. Watch out for these symptoms. They are not just symptoms of surrender, very often ecumenically offered to you by men of God in other robes, Christian and Jewish and smarmy ecumenical. These are the ones who will hold open the gates for the barbarians. The barbarians never take a city till someone holds the gates open for them. And it's your own preachers who will do it for you, and your own multicultural authorities who will do it for you. Resist it while you can. And if you wonder what will happen if you don't, look and see how a cricket team in Middlesex in England had to change its name by force last week because it was called, and had been for years, the Middlesex Crusaders. Look and see how stories about little pigs can't be taught to children in English schools anymore, lest offence be taken by the religion of peace. Resist it while you can.